Hello and welcome back to the island for part 2 of 4 of our special summer interview series, Deserted Island Dads. While History on the Table is on a short break for the summer, we thought we'd help you pass the time by hosting a couple interviews with some very special guests. This time we're joined by Mark from Coin Collectors, who just celebrated their 1-year anniversary of recording a podcast. Now, longtime listeners of History on the Table will know that there are some coin titles that aren't necessarily my favorite games. Regardless of that fact, it's always interesting to sit down and talk with someone who's passionate about what they enjoy, and that's exactly what we did with Mark. So sit back, shake up a Mai Tai, wash ashore, enjoy the interview, and just as a quick reminder, we're just under 2 months out from Historic Fest. There's a link in the show notes, historicfest.com. I hope when the summer draws to an end, we see you in Kansas City. All right, enjoy the interview. Thanks. All right, after a night of intense, heavy drinking and celebrating the 1-year anniversary of Coin Collectors, we have a new castaway to the island.
Not so loud. My head.
Hello. Welcome ashore. Who do we have with us?
This is Mark from the Coin Collectors.
Yeah, well, welcome, Mark. Tell us a little about Coin Collectors in case a listener doesn't know.
Yeah, sure. So Coin Collectors is a war game and particularly coin series game focused podcast that releases under the Dads on a Map podcast umbrella. So Dads on a Map was started by James and Sanchez, and they run a pretty regular every couple weeks podcast on whatever games they're playing, particularly train games, cube rails games, some war games to a limited extent. And they have a really active Discord, Dads on the Map Discord. Come join us. And myself, along with Tyler, Phil, and Tom, had been playing some coin games for a while and decided to start talking about them and recording our thoughts on those games. And James and Sanchez were kind enough to allow us to put out our little podcast under the, among the larger Dads on a Map community. And so we approximately once a month will put out a war game focused podcast. Again, we mostly have been looking at coin games, but we recently wrapped up our 1-year kind of anniversary of broadcasting. We did kind of a 2-part series where we interviewed Jason Carr, head of development at GMT Games. And then we followed up with some of our own thoughts on our episodes we recorded, the state of the industry, and what we're excited about in the future.
It was great. I enjoyed it over lunch today, actually.
Yeah, I'm glad. Thanks.
Yeah, well, so I have some great news, but I do have some bad news. So we have an ample supply of opponents and scotch and beer and any spirit you could imagine. I think I saw a prototype copy of Red Dust Rebellion washed ashore. And Volkarunki will be by to take your drink order in a minute. Other than that, we have no games.
Oh, no.
Yep.
It is my worst nightmare.
We're going to play a little game, and we're going to see what you washed ashore with, and we'll have a conversation. For those who this may be your first Deserted Island Dads, welcome. I have Baby on the Table Part 2 on its way, and so this is a little, just fun little standby series that we're pre-recording. This is recorded on May 2nd. We just have a conversation, talking about games, talking about war games, talking about families in gaming, anything in between. So I want to touch on something that you actually mentioned in your end of the year show, but let's get a Deserted Island game out of the way.
Alrighty.
And let's start with what I assume may be the smallest. Let's start with card games. So what's your Deserted Island card game?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I grew up playing bridge, contract bridge. So I played a lot of that in high school. I mean, we were playing every day, me and some friends, and we'd even go to tournaments and earn American Contract Bridge League master points. And I didn't earn very many, but it was something we were really into. And so kind of like, that was kind of, my seminal moment in gaming in a lot of ways. And so I think a lot of my interest in games, particularly card games, comes out of bridge. Not necessarily the trick taking aspect of bridge, but in the here's a hand, and no matter how awful it is, you have to do something with it. And so if I can stretch the definition of card game just a tad, I would say, the card game I'd want to have, and probably my number one game overall, is Twilight Struggle. Just nothing to me beats getting handed just an absolute pile of garbage and deciding, okay, what's the worst or what's the least bad path through this minefield, and trying to figure out how you can, head fake your opponent and play things out in the right order, and, kind of having a good enough at least understanding the deck to know, all right, if I do this, something could happen. That's without a doubt. I could play that game every day and be a very happy person.
Interesting. Not the direction I thought you were going with that. And I don't think I've looked at Twilight Struggle or similarly Labyrinth through that lens before. Usually I get a bad hand and I just curse it. I don't see it as an opportunity. Have you played much Labyrinth?
No, I have not.
Okay.
It's definitely on my want to explore list, but I haven't touched on that one yet. I think bridge, particularly competitive bridge, is played where it's not even so much how, playing the hand you have, but you're actually playing other people who have the same hand. So you play it in a style called duplicate, where once you're done, you put your own hand back in a little carrier board and you hand it over to another table, and that table will play exactly the same hand.
Whoa.
So it doesn't even matter like how good or bad the hand was, is how much better you can play than anyone else. And you're not doing that exactly in Twilight Struggle, but I view Twilight Struggle through that lens of saying, I have a bad hand. My opponent probably also has a bad hand.
Right.
And how much better can I play my bad hand than my opponent can? And so it's those kind of like little marginal gains that I'm kind of clued into. And that's what, kind of that scratches that itch for me with Twilight Struggle is asking me to solve that puzzle.
That's fascinating. And when did you start playing Twilight Struggle? Do you recall?
Yeah. So it was, I'm relatively kind of recently returned to board games.
Okay.
And I would say it was like, it was 2018, the Thanksgiving of 2018. My in-laws were coming over and I wanted to do something kind of fun, something unusual. And I knew my mother-in-law really liked Yahtzee. And so I went out to the board game store and I did some research beforehand and then went out and bought a copy of King of New York, which if you haven't played that, it's kind of a Yahtzee style rolling game and monsters beating each other up. And so that wasn't like the first kind of like hobby board game I had owned. We had Dominion, we had Ticket to Ride. We always had a stack of these things, and it wasn't unusual that maybe I'd get one as a present from my family or something like that. But it was that was kind of like the turning moment when I was like, I did that research to find out what's a Yahtzee like game, and then discovered like the Dice Tower, and went and was looking at games that won Golden Geek Awards recently, and started buying a few of these and started getting more into that. And I think in this process, particularly kind of like looking into Golden Geek, I was looking at kind of like what had been number one games. I don't remember if Twilight Struggle was still number one in 2018 or if it had been displaced not too long before that, but that quickly showed up on my radar screen. And then, it would have been a little while before I finally picked up a copy, but it was maybe a year or two later during one of GMT's kind of like big sales, when they were the kind of like warehouse sales. I went and splurged and bought a whole bunch of these games that I've been kind of keeping my eye on, including Twilight Struggle and my still unplayed copy of Here I Stand, and the first coin game I ever purchased, Pendragon. And I purchased all these things, and then I didn't have anyone to play with. So I got the app and I played the Twilight Struggle app and, got beat by the not very good AI and got a little better and got a little better. And I wouldn't say I'm good yet, but yeah, it was, I went from nothing to something anyway. That was my experience.
Great. And so I don't want to misquote you here. And I think this kind of ties into where I was going actually, is you may have mentioned, if I heard correctly, like the next place you want to go in wargaming after this year of an impressive amount of coin games is some of those staples or just tried and true war games that you may have missed. Am I saying that correctly?
No, you're absolutely right. I don't think I've ever really played a hex encounter game unless you count Space Empires 4X.
Sure.
So yeah, I don't have a lot of exposure to that. And, I'll be in your Discord and you'll be posting, this game versus that game. And I look at them and I say, they both sound good. I don't know either of these things. And according to the, every war game ever list, this one's, 15 and this one's 28. And I should go out and play these things because there are, some 30 other war games in the world that are worse than that one. So I should go out and,
exactly.
and play number 18. At the same time, I'm also, I'm also kind of selective, because my interest in these games is not so much about like the mechanics of combat. I'm not so concerned in kind of, how would a squad go about something, or how would this technology be better than that technology. But I'm really interested in, why do we fight? What are the motivations?
Mm.
What is a victory beyond just like wiping out, an enemy formation? And so that's what I'm really looking for. So I'm looking for games that have a lot of above the table action, a lot of almost wheeling and dealing, and have more than just or at least maybe not more than just, but emphasize the kind of the political dynamic that also goes along with conflicts. And that's I want to go back, and I know there's a lot of games like this, and that's really what I want to be exploring.
Is there any, because I've talked about it before, and we can go back to games that are 40, 45 years old and maybe even older and find outstanding war games. And I think we have a wide range of games available to us, where Cult of the New to me doesn't really matter as much so much in wargaming, because there's such an impressive backlog of war games that we'll never play. And so what are some front runners from your pre-war game interests that you really want to check out?
So as I said, I have this copy of Here I Stand sitting on my shelf, kind of mocking me and my 5 friends that I don't have at that moment. So that's certainly something I want to play. I've heard you talk about Sword of Rome as being the, any player count less than 6 version of that. Some of the antecedents to the Coin series. Vocal Runke's notes point out Angola as being inspirational for Andean Abyss. I'd like to go back and kind of, read the work the masters were reading. And, given how much I like, Twilight Struggle, I want to look more into CDGs. Sure. That's just a mechanic that I found so fun. So I'd like to go back and do that. And I mean, kind of anything with Mark Herman's name on it, will get my attention. Churchill, for example, I really want to get back to those. The Histo games, they have kind of I feel like they're kind of their own little niche in the hobby, but they have some very, very, very strong supporters and vocal supporters. And that's another area I want to explore more.
Awesome. Let's take a quick pause and we'll do another Deserted Island war game, because this is non-war game, but it's when I hear things like this, it's really tempting for me to chase those rabbit trails, because even, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, if you started playing Twilight Struggle in 2018 and I started playing war games not long before you, so we're actually in a similar boat. I think we've taken slightly divergent paths with your interest in Coin and these how you guys you use this term above the table interaction, which I really like. But let's take a pause from that real quick, and why don't we talk about your Deserted Island non-war game board game?
Yeah, that was a tough one. Because I think of myself as very much an omni gamer.
Sure.
And so it, despite the fact that I do this podcast about coin games and war games, that's a relatively small part of my overall interest in the hobby. So kind of narrowing this down was tough, but at the end of the day, I think I have to give it to Tigris and Euphrates, the Reiner Knizia tile layer classic. This is another one of these kind of, you get a little hand of tiles, and it's not always what you want, but you have to work with it. I love the spatial element of the game as these little kind of settlements grow and interact. And nothing is ever really owned by anyone, at least in any kind of permanent way. There's not your own home base, because someone comes in and drops down a leader and has a revolt, and somehow the dust clears and suddenly that's not yours anymore. And all of your plans about expanding in this way and building in that way just go up in a puff of smoke. But the game has a great pace. It never outstays its welcome. And it just ticks so many boxes for me. So if I could have my Tigris and Euphrates, and you said I got like unlimited beverages. I've always wanted to have a T and E and TEA, kind of like Sunday morning, kind of like group, just to get together and play that, kind of like, chess in the park kind of a thing. So, if I have to be on this desert island, at least I can make my T and E and T club be a reality.
Oh, there are no limits to your imagination other than the games. So, Tigers and Euphrates is a game from the late 90s. And when I started getting in a hobby war game, like, sure, something you heard about, like Tigers and Euphrates, just like, I don't know, you maybe heard about Acquire or something else, pick your game that predates you joining the hobby. And then I start hanging out with the Domers, and then I really start hearing about Tigers and Euphrates. I've never played it.
Oh, I think you'd love it. It has war game bones in a weird way. Like it's not at all obvious, but it's there. It's there.
Have you played Yellow and Yangtze?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
The between kind of like limited print runs and having a copy of T&E that I wasn't playing enough, I haven't got a chance. I heard it has a good app, so that would be an easy way to revisit it. It's something I'd like to try at least, but I just haven't been. Once you have something that's kind of close enough, sometimes it kind of like eats the babies, and you never end up, doing the thing that maybe is better and maybe is at least just different. But I just haven't made that effort.
It took me a very long. When I would tell people that the U.S. Civil War is my favorite game, always, have you played victory games of Civil War? It's like, well, and I finally have since then. But for a long time, it's kind of like, well, why would I? Because this is the masterpiece. I only asked about Yellow and Yangtze because I have it, but my interest in T&E has certainly been piqued. So you mentioned that coin as a whole is a rather small part of your overall interest in the hobby, but I am curious why. What was it about coin that, other than clever alliteration, to spawn coin collectors?
Well, yeah, it was really that we came up with the name first, and then it was just lucky there was a series that had the same name. I know that would have been awkward otherwise. I would have been, at the stamp and coin shop every weekend if that hadn't happened. I think, just again, it was that political dynamic, and I could see that right away that this was a game that. That in a very mechanical way tried to model politics. That at least the kind of the typical coin model is you have in any kind of particular region, you have both a kind of a physical show of strength in terms of who controls that region, and just on sheer number of pieces, or kind of maybe relative strength of pieces or something like that. But then there's also kind of the hearts and minds, and there's the political support. And often these two things are at odds with each other. So if the United States decides to call in air support in Fire in the Lake and bomb a region, that drives down the political support. They're not just destroying the guerrillas; they're destroying fields and villages, and that turns the local population away. Or they're spraying for coca plants in Andean Abyss. And again, they're achieving one goal at the cost of another. And then layered on top of that is that these factions are often they're not going for the exact same kind of a win. That what they want to do, how they win, depends on their objectives, and they don't all have the same objectives. Some want, control of kind of the levers of government, and maybe they want to control territory or have access to certain resources, whereas others are playing purely, are trying to just win on propaganda and trying to, convince the local groups to join with them, and can kind of, hop in and do something good for the local population, and then kind of wink out of existence there and move into the next place and set up another, kind of temporary activity there. And that kind of dynamic it just tickles my brain just to think about, all right, as a player, what am I trying to do, and where are my levers that I can pull? The first time I play any of these games, I can often see, I want to move this marker up this track. I want to get more territory. Well, how do I do that? Well, the only way this faction can get territory is to do this other thing. And you start to see these bigger loops exist. And later on, then I like to engage with these games and think about, well, what was the the thesis here? What was this designer trying to do? Because the people designing these games have put so much thought and effort into trying to say, all right, here's a moment in history, and I'm going to try to imagine what the motivations and capabilities and limitations and interactions of all these groups were, and how can I express what these things were within these kind of tropes and conventions of this coin series. Kind of my personal favorite in this regard is Liberty or Death, which views, and this is contentious, but which views the United States American Revolution as this counterinsurgency kind of world. And even it's something I think is often undersold. In my brief introductions to other war games in this period, gives agency to native factions that have an interest in exactly, their interest sometimes aligns with the British, but they don't necessarily, exactly align. And these kinds of things are just they just help me understand the period. And even if I know it's this isn't reality. This isn't me watching history unfold on this table exactly, but it's me playing with a model that someone thinks could be the way the history happened. And I like to understand that model, and I like to see, to what degree can I see this reflected in my understanding of the history, in what areas maybe this doesn't seem to capture what's going on, what would be interesting ways that this could change, what is the limitations of the system, where do we have to simplify, what maybe was lost in that. So I think those are the things that always kind of attract me. It kind of attracted me immediately to this series. And I'm not quite sure how I saw that, from the outside, having not played a game, but maybe it was just enough kind of hype around it that I said, hey, this is worth trying. And I did. And then it kind of clicked. And
yeah, you found a deeper level to it, or
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I've talked about my feelings on coin before, and that's not what we're here to do. But I think part of my problem with my first couple of goes at coin, which were Cuba Libre and Liberty or Death, actually, was the lens I was playing the game from. And when I first started playing war games, my interest was very superficial. Like, I just want to push dudes on a map and go play battle, right? And that's not the expectation you should have at coin. But like, the more I spend time in this hobby and talk with people, is either you start seeing those theses that you talked about, the designer's thesis behind it, or just talking to designers and even just getting the mechanical thought process of why this mechanic is here. There's a reason this CRT looks this way. And I think anytime we can actually, I don't want to sound, I mean, you use the word not in this, but I don't want to sound pretentious here. Like, you can just play these games to have fun for sure. But there certainly has been over the last few years, like, there are layers upon layers, and you can get different rewards depending on how you approach any of these games.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also important too that, designers give these conflicts, these moments in time, very serious consideration, right? People died, the atrocities were committed. And sometimes, you're playing a side that, had a My Lai or, wiped out a village or something. And I think it's important that we're playing games that they give that a certain amount of gravity, and we as players, we understand that and can engage with that and understand, that we're doing this to understand history. And it should be fun as well, right? That we're playing games, and this is a leisure activity for us. But I like that I can both enjoy it sometimes because I had a great roll, for this battle, or I was able to time something just right. And, that's just kind of fun in its kind of basic way. But then, when I'm done, I'm sitting back and thinking, I was like, oh, that's interesting. What if this offensive had been successful? Sure. What if I was playing, Imperial Struggle with a friend, what if, Britain did in fact win the American Revolution and had this huge foothold in North America? What happens then? I think it's fun to come back at it from those kinds of angles and see those little opportunities for thinking about, what does this tell us about history? What does this tell about human conflict? What does this tell us about power dynamics? And, coin in particular, these kind of, established governments fighting insurgent groups, and ones that can blend in well and are hard to find, and it's not just big set piece battles on a battlefield. I think this is, again, this kind of stuff that's kind of after the play is done and I'm just kind of relaxing later and maybe going to bed and brushing my teeth. These are things that are still going on in my head, and that's kind of lasting experience. I think is what we're all looking for in these games, is ones that they stay with us once we're done. Once we put all the pieces back in the box, our brain is still going over things and thinking, oh, what was a better move I could have made, or what did this mean, or maybe I should go get a book on this subject and reread Matterhorn again or something like that.
Oh, don't bring up Matterhorn. That's just gonna we could have a whole episode on Matterhorn. Yeah, I think that is a hallmark of a great game. Like you pack up and then instantly you're like, maybe we should set this up and go again.
Mm-hmm.
Or all of the you can't sleep at night because you're tossing around or too excited after some crazy die rolls. While we're on the thread, we might as well just jump to Deserted Island War Game.
Okay.
What do you got?
I don't think anyone at this point would be surprised, at least in broad strokes. I waffled on this one, back and forth and back and forth. I think I'll have to go with Fire in the Lake.
Awesome.
As number one. But I have this special love of my first coin game ever, Pendragon, which is this perhaps the strangest entry in the series in a lot of ways, but it was the first one I ever had, and I started by playing it solo. I just played four-handed solo. The year I got it, my wife and my kids were visiting the relatives for a week, and I was refinishing our deck. And so I would go out there and, scrape and paint and do all these things on the deck during the day. And then I'd come in and be all sweaty and just move pieces around four-handed solo and Pendragon. And, kind of like, the baby duck who imprints on some human who takes care of it, at a young age. I think Pendragon is I've kind of imprinted on that as this great game. And I still love it. I still absolutely love it. But Fire in the Lake, man, what a game too. Coming back to that one later. That one's just so good.
Completely agree. I think Fire in the Lake's a fantastic choice. It's one of the first coins to really click for me. Is there anything we just talked about why coin? Is there anything specifically about Fire in the Lake other than those broad strokes that really put it as the front runner for you?
Yeah, I mean, within the scope of coin games themselves, I think that it represents one of the most streamlined yet flexible implementations. The battles are pretty straightforward. You just remove a piece. At the same time, you have a few extra tracks in terms of the trail that the North is trying to maintain, and you have this patronage that Arvin is trying to siphon off. It has it has two great frenemy factions, right? I love this aspect where you're kind of nominally on the same side as another player, but I think the fractures are some of the best in Fire in the Lake, between U.S. and Arvin, and on one hand, and then Arvin trying to steal off the patronage, and the United States trying to get their people out of there. And then on the other hand, you have the NVA, which is trying to push the VC to be cannon fodder, and the VC is trying to kind of let the NVA actually do the real fighting and kind of pop up behind. And yeah, I think there's just I think I've said this on our podcast a lot, which is we're often asking what's the best first coin game, and while Fire in the Lake probably has a lot of reasons why it probably shouldn't be, it's the one I always kind of want to be the first coin game. I was like, let's just show you everything. Let's just show you everything a coin can have, at least so far, right? In the future, who knows? But let's show you, I think in some ways, some of the best implementations of all the systems, and just throw it out there. And it's huge and crazy. And, maybe you won't even finish that first game, but let's just show that out there and just get that in the spotlight and let everyone kind of see the scope of the game. Maybe don't go play Fire in the Lake as your first coin game. This is from the guy who played Pendragon as his first coin game, and that one's like kind of the other end of the things where everything is complicated. It's got complicated battles and these little kind of fiddly little pieces in which you're these little Trivial Pursuit pie slice pieces have to carry these little gold cubes off the board, and I love just looking at that. But man, it's a crazy game. But the Civitates and Duck's relationship in that one is I just love that one so much. So again, these above the table kinds of things, and here we have this established Roman kind of economic class, and as well as this kind of military that's trying to control, maintain Roman military control as it's slipping and the empire is crumbling, and they're starting off as being so aligned, and then the game itself pushes them towards having greater and greater schisms. Eventually, I mean, quite literally, there's a card that the Ducks can play that kind of slashes that and immediately divides their support. I just love that evolution of that relationship in that game. Those are the kind of things, again, they kind of keep me coming back at those. It's the games are just wooden cardboard. It's the players that are making it interesting, and games that can make the players do interesting things and have interesting interactions are the ones that always get my attention.
First off, I just want to say I love when any person you get them talking about a passionate, whatever their passion is. So like hearing you talking about Pendragon, it's cool. The other thing I do want to say is I think it was in Dome that this came up where coin is group dependent. I think that can be apply to board games as a whole, but especially in negotiation driven games. I recently played a great game of Dune, and it had a lot of like selling information and negotiating and deal making. And afterwards I was just thinking like how boring Dune would be without any of the negotiation. And I've played coin games where you don't have full group buy-in. And I don't think that's a side effect of coin. I think it's more of maybe a side effect of the type of game coin can be at its best.
Yeah. I think it certainly, it takes the bumpers off in the way of saying, okay, we're going to set you up, but you have to do the work. The game isn't going to do those negotiations for you. And to be honest, at least for the coin collectors, I don't think we're the most wheeling and dealing of groups. It's not every single card we're always out there talking, but usually there's going to be some key moments in the game where we just, we slow down a little bit and we start to say, okay, all right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass so that I could be first in order next time. But I'm only going to do that if you say you're going to do this other thing. And then the other person's, maybe kind of, oh, I don't know, or like they'll do it and they'll maybe like, take the event and do it somewhere, which wouldn't be the most helpful. And, it's not that has to be like every single moment of the game, but yeah, you definitely have to have at least, you can play, anyone can play these games however they want. Let me say, I don't want to be
fair,
prescriptive about this, but I definitely think it, has as a mindset, thinking about, at a minimum, thinking about, kind of talking with your own, kind of nominally allied player, and then, maybe moving on. Sometimes you want to talk to an enemy and say, hey, you know what, actually, I'll let you, take over this region because that's going to slow down this other person who's in the lead, who's, sort of my friend, but, I still want to win. And yeah, but yeah, I have to agree. You're absolutely right about kind of having the right table for it. People who want to do that. That's not everyone's cup of tea, and maybe there's still a fun experience in the box for those people. But maybe it's just not the game, and other things would be more what they're looking for. Maybe it's better to have kind of a clearer enemy. Me
right.
versus them. Maybe it's better to have more of an optimization puzzle, or just calculate a game about calculation and who can do the best calculation. And if that's what you're looking for, then great.
Of course. And yeah. I don't even know if you need, I use wheeling and dealing from Dune because that's when I think Dune's at its best. For coin, I guess for me, it just, and again, if people play it a different way, you're absolutely right. I think it's at its best when people go beyond just the mechanics. And any way you do that, because the mechanics are very superficial. And this kind of goes back to me in my introduction to coin, where like, oh, I want to go fight. Mm-hmm. Well, that's not why you should be necessarily playing a coin game.
Right. You want conflict, but
right.
maybe not necessarily fighting. And
right.
that could be, I mean, sometimes it is, sometimes
sure.
You just want to get out there and get rid of their pieces. But yeah, you get that conflict going.
Is there, I didn't ask you this beforehand, so it's catching you a little bit off guard, but is there, I know we have all these coin titles, on the horizon, and now we're starting to see from other companies outside of GMT, like labeling their games coin inspired. And Is there some topic of history or direction that you want to see the coin series go or cover?
Um, so I'll answer that by I'll talk a little bit about something I've been thinking about. In other podcasts that I like, the Revolutions podcast
Uh-huh.
by Mike Duncan is absolutely fantastic, and uh, I've listened to several of this kind of sub series of that several again and again, and the one I've returned to several times is the Haitian Revolution.
Oh.
I've always thought about it'd be fun to do something like this as a coin. But I wrestle with it as well because I end up writing down these factions and I'm like, okay, well, this is the enslaver faction, and does anyone really want to play that? And so I think that's maybe an interesting kind of question for these games. Not like the topics so far have been easy by
Right.
any means, but they've been maybe a little bit more ambiguous. And I kind of wonder if these games can work in situations where there's kind of a much clearer historical bad guy. Like Vietnam kind of works because on one hand you had communism, but it was really kind of a homegrown communism, and then you had the America being kind of imperial, and it's not something that we as Americans are collectively have made our peace with that war. And so you can kind of play all these sides, and everyone can feel equally bad. Whereas I kind of wonder if coin could be extended. I want to understand the politics of things like the Haitian Revolution, but you had people whose number one goal it was to put people in chains, and I don't think you can not do that. I mean, you could do something different. You could design a game maybe where you're kind of maybe playing more cooperatively, or so it's somewhat cooperatively against a common kind of AI enemy or something like that. But I think so. Maybe I'm answering your question in a different way. Say, I think there are places where I really like to bring the kind of the core ideas of thinking about models of political and military interaction, but are areas that I don't know if it would work as a game in terms of just would you want to be playing all these sides? Could we do it in a way that gave people just an enjoyable game, even if they could be having to play some real monsters? I kind of wonder about these kinds of things. That's one area that I'm curious about as a possibility.
Yeah, well, it's certainly one interesting topic, and it is. I mean, a lot of topics. I have game aspirations and design ideas as well, and sometimes that's a really hard hurdle to get over. Is who wants to play this terrible faction? And I think so much of it comes through the lens. Like, why are they playing that faction?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes the why in wargaming, some people may have the wrong why, especially in a traditional hex encounter war game. But I think if you have, there's definitely an approach that should be taken and could be taken to maybe make that an interesting why, even with a true bad guy in coin.
Right. I just think that, in games that really emphasize political dimensions, I think that why question becomes even stronger. If you're playing Axis and Allies, this is tanks, different kinds of tanks fighting each other. You're not, no one, the Nazis don't get any, extra political bonus by, ghettoizing and sending people off to concentration camps. And that's probably for the better. Like, I can't imagine the game would be better if it had that element to it. But
right.
But at the same time, if you wanted to explore that, could Germany coming out of World War I and these punitive repercussions, I know there's like multiple games about the Weimar Republic going on right now. So maybe these kinds of questions are being asked in those games, and I'm looking forward to finding out about that. But what could have happened? What if the war effort had been not so kind of nationalistic and but at the same time, maybe that's an option for that player to scapegoat and to dehumanize people, and then that gets some local political support that makes their options cheaper. Like, I think that's the kind of questions I want board games to make us wrestle with, but maybe that wasn't a fun thing to do. So maybe there's not really a game there. I don't know. Those are the best ones. These games that make you kind of think about these choices, but at the same time are still enjoyable and, defensible. I don't want to. I'd hate to have a game set out like that and someone come by and say, "What are you doing?" Well, I'm sending. I've decided to send people, in these cattle cars to a concentration camp because it helps me win this board game. Right? That's not something I ever want to say to someone.
Are you following the progress of Cross Bronx Expressway?
Only from a great distance. I know it exists. I've heard Non-Breaking Space talk about it a little bit. I think on like the Homo Ludens podcast, if I remember correctly. But I'm not, in terms of kind of the actual mechanics and, kind of the more nitty gritty of it, I'm not too up to speed.
Well, the only reason I bring it up is because it has these really interesting win conditions, and I think it gets exactly what you're getting at. It is tough actions, and like you wouldn't want to tell anyone, oh, what are you doing? And I don't remember exactly what the whatever bad actions you're taking are, but you're carrying these out to win, but you can't go so far to destroy the entire infrastructure of what you're trying to build out. And then you're also like, you're managing debt and all these things that are bad actions, but it kind of seems like to me, like, how far are you willing to push those to win? It sounds really interesting.
I think this area is somewhere where maybe we have to be even a little bit more speculative about history, and say, what could have happened instead, right? Rather than, I'll take another kind of a different trend in these examples. Instead of having the Europeans come and push out the locals or enslave the locals. What if there was trade? What if there was engagement? In an economic and in a social way. What could have happened instead? I think at least coin games so far have tended to be, it's certainly not on rails, but with all this event deck that comes out of history, it feels very grounded in history, but it's not, maybe not quite as speculative as it would need to be, I think, to grapple with some of these topics. Could you give someone other options at the same time? Would you really be capturing, what pressures, what constraints these actors were feeling at the time? And I think, threading that needle, I think that's what would make a great game, if someone could balance those things to say, okay, you're both, you're both thinking like this, like these people did, you're understanding what their pressures were, but maybe you can figure out a way that doesn't, involve the worst possible outcomes. I haven't played it, but there's a game called The Cost that came out in the last year or two about asbestos mining. And
yeah.
I feel like that's what they were going for with that game, from what I've heard. I need to play it. I haven't played it, but I feel like that was kind of their goal, is to think about, okay, here's, you're running this mine, you can, either run it cheap or expensive. You can export it here, you can export it there. These have real costs to human life, but you have to make choices in the game. As I said, I haven't played the game. I don't want to talk about that one specifically, but I think that kind of mentality is what I like to see.
It's just like trying to think through it. Just I'm thinking different, like political events. Like, what if the entire Russian officer group wasn't purged in World War II or something like that? I mean, you can pick any historical thing and throw a what if on it. I love sandbox games that let you explore that. But even then, super interesting idea. I'd love to see someone give a go at that, and maybe Cross Bronx Expressway is the closest to do that. But I do certainly an interesting question to ask and explore in the wargame space.
Yeah, and to loop back to like the kind of the way you phrase this question initially is like, kind of what directions would you want to go, or thinking about some of these kind of coin adjacent games. I think, other settings that aren't explicitly historical are probably good opportunities to explore these. Within the coin line, like Red Dust Rebellion, this future society that might have this dynamic. We don't have to feel, it doesn't have that kind of baggage of historical realism that we need to involve, or if we're making cute woodland creatures square off in battle, we don't have to feel so bad when we like destroy their villages,
right?
And things. It's a little bit more abstract in that way. So maybe there are opportunities to explore it in those kinds of settings that wouldn't be possible in the historical world in quite the same way.
Sure. Well, I'd be very interested. One, I'm already interested in Red Dust Rebellion. Even with a somewhat minimal interest in coin, I do find it interesting. But um, yeah, I think all of that is very well said and very interesting. I'm going to take it in a lighter direction though,
Right on.
because I want to save some time to talk about families and gaming. So let's throw a
Yeah.
light. How about Deserted Island RPG?
Well, I'm going to have to talk about family and gaming here to preempt you a little bit. So I'm not much of a role playing game person,
Okay.
at least kind of inherently. When I was young, when I was very young, I mean, like in grade school, some of the kids in my neighborhood were really into this Steve Jackson. I think it was Steve Jackson games. Tune. It was like you were playing like Bugs Bunny and Donald Duck as role playing game characters. And we played the heck out of that one. But then, I never was very much into Dungeons and Dragons as I got older. And so kind of, for a span of, 25 or more years, I probably hadn't played a role playing game. And then when COVID hit, a friend of mine, he has a son the same age as my son and a daughter who's a little younger than my middle daughter. My kids are 11 and 9 right now. And I have a 3-year-old as well, but we can come back to that. So he contacted me and said, "Hey, we're all on lockdown. Why don't we do a weekly Dungeons and Dragons campaign over Zoom?" And he said, "I'll be the dungeon master for that, the game master for that, and we can do that." So we have for, I guess, a little over 2 years now. I've been meeting almost every week, except for a few trips here and there, and then things like that, to do Dungeons and Dragons
Wow.
adventures. And my son, it just immediately, just from the very first day, boom, it just hit, and it has just been huge with him. Just absolutely, not all consuming, but just he just it was fish in water immediately. And even after our very first session, like we're done, we say, "Oh no, bye, thanks." We turn off the Zoom session. He turns to me, he's like, "Dad, can I be the dungeon master?" And so he has run his own campaigns now. So like we've kind of alternated some storylines where he'll run it, and we'll be some adventurers who are moving through various myths and legends. He's very much into the kind of the Rick Riordan myths and legends series of books is kind of popular right now. And so he kind of bases it in that, but then Sonic the Hedgehog shows up because, hey, why not? And, we have some big battle and we do some fun stuff. And my daughter, who's now 9, she's run some like one-offs for holidays. So we did a Nutcracker themed adventure, and if she ever writes it up, I'm going to give a little spoiler. The bad guy in that ended up being the Salty Plum Fairy, who was angry that the Sugar Plum Fairy was getting all the attention. And then we recently had a kind of a Easter spring themed revisit, and again the Salty Plum Fairy came back to kidnap the Easter Bunny, and we had to go out and work that all out again, and solve that little mystery. And yeah, it's been it's not something that I would have gone and sought out on my own, but just as something to experience with my kids. It has been pretty amazing.
That is amazing. I had my own role playing is relatively new as well, just in the last 2 years. But once I got my wife involved into it, and we've done little like one-on-one role playing sessions where she's played D&D. We also did Kids on Bikes, which is really light. And just when we get those moments, I don't think she would have ever done that before. And just seeing that light turn on and then hearing you do that's like the ideal for me. And that's kind of one of the questions I want to lead into is like, okay, you've now had this 2-year ongoing role playing session with your kids. Was there always kind of this, I guess if they're 11 and 9, it may kind of predate you coming back to the hobby or whatever, but did you always have in the back of your mind, like, hey, games are going to be something our family does? Or was it something less intentional, maybe something that happened naturally?
It certainly wasn't intended when we started having children.
Okay.
So, when we had kids, this is back when we had, Ticket to Ride, or we'd play Lost Cities, and even some, I think, high quality games in kind of the hobby sphere. But certainly we weren't hardcore into it, and I wasn't really expecting, I'm not having children just to fill out, a 4-person board game. Now, now I have 3 kids, and so my wife can eventually have, a night off when we're playing, a full 4-person game of Root or something like that. But that wasn't the intention.
I'm just now imagine that conversation with my wife. Hey, we really need a 5th for Sword of Rome.
This is outside of my hands. I can just say it's been working for us. It's been working for us. Yeah. But it's the kind of thing that now, looking back on it, it kind of in some ways feels like it was inevitable. That it was going to happen. It's one of those things like, it's like first your friends know, then then your parents know. It's one of those kind of things about yourself that maybe I could have anticipated this a little bit earlier and realized that this was going to be the case. I certainly we were the kind of family that if dad was going to get really into something, everyone was going to be involved, whether they liked it or not. And it helps that they like it. And I think particularly the kids, they want to just, do what their parents do and be included. And so it wasn't a hard sell for them. And my wife is a great sport, and she's not, nearly as hard in the hobby as I am, but she's happy to play anything I ask her to play. She certainly has her preferences. Something we've enjoyed recently was Red Flag Over Paris. Yeah, that's a great length for an evening, and she's been enjoying that one. But to kind of go back to your question, kind of the fact that I got into it kind of meant that everyone was going to get into it, and so we started doing some cooperatives. So the kids would probably have been like 5 and 7 when I was kind of getting back into the game. So we weren't jumping the deep end, but it was pretty quick that I was really impressed how kind of quickly they were able to absorb rules, not necessarily do strategy, and certainly didn't have attention span for really long things. But in terms of just kind of getting in and playing, they were gung ho about it. It's kind of in that first year of getting back into board games. So it was me, my wife, my 2 kids, and we invited some good friends of ours over to form a 6-person legacy campaign of Charterstone, the Stonemaier legacy game. And so that one's, it's a pretty light game. It's just kind of very simple worker placement thing, but it plays out over 12 games. And so, once a week for, about 3 months, we got together and we played a game of Charterstone, and the kids, they held their own in it. We often kind of shortened the game a little bit to kind of fit their attention span, but we never had to make the rules themselves any simpler. They always understood that. They kind of knew what their objectives were. They always had a plan, even if it wasn't the one I would have necessarily picked. They had an idea they wanted to do. And they've, I think that was kind of the moment when we became a gaming family, is we had this, this kind of big thing we took on and we did over this 3-month period. And that was kind of what solidified us. And so now most of my playing is probably with my kids. And I would just, being home, and COVID certainly helps it, but I think anyway, we just enjoy playing together and get together and do these kinds of things. And my youngest, my 3-year-old, she's been seeing us play Root. So the older 2 and my wife and I have been playing Root a little bit. And so now the younger one wants to play that. And she asks, can we get Root down and play with it? And, just kind of move the pieces around a little bit, or play with one of her games that's, a little bit more toy factor. But yeah, that's, I think, this is kind of a common thing. If you want to be a family that goes out and does hikes every weekend, just go do hikes every weekend.
Right.
And the kids will get on board with that. If you want to be the family that plays board games, just play board games, and the kids will get on board with that. And it's worked for us anyway.
Good. That's great. You got one deserted island, and you can stretch this one, or you could be a miniatures game. I may not know, but deserted island miniature game.
Yeah. So I'm not really a miniatures gamer, either the kind of 40K style or big box of plastic, kind of board game style. I think the closest would probably be Too Many Bones, which is the chip theory kind of dungeon crawler in a box entry. And speaking of games I play with my family, we have played the heck out of that one.
I was going to ask. That seems like a good.
Yeah, so we would. We haven't. It's been a little bit since we played a game, but we had a streak last winter where pretty much every Sunday we would be playing a 6-hour game of that.
Wow,
Yeah, it
that's
was
awesome.
pretty amazing. This is back when, or actually maybe it wasn't this previous winter, but the year before, when she was little enough to take longer naps. That's when we would be playing these 6-hour these series, and my kids, they get to know their characters. When Chip Theory was launching another Kickstarter, they pooled their money with Dad to get the Trove box. Yeah, it's definitely been kind of a big thing for a whole family to be involved with, and that's been a good one for us. I think it kind of tickles some of that RPG aspect. Now looking back, that my son and my daughter would really enjoy. And it's got it's cooperative games. We're all working together, and hopefully not getting too frustrated with each other. That's when it breaks down. Is sometimes it's like, oh no, he's got to go attack that thing, and then the kid like goes the other direction or something. You're like, but yeah, it's good. A good bonding moment for all of us to just soak in this world of gear locks and trolls and dragons and just kind of experience that. Roll a bunch of dice. Can never go wrong with that with kids.
Yeah, absolutely. My daughter is 2, and we have some like very basic Hama games.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But checking that dice with the fish for a little go fish game, that's a big hit, and that's about as far as we go.
Yep. I mean, I think like that age, you just get the pieces out.
Oh
you can,
yeah, you push the fish
you can move them around. If you can work on taking turns, I call that about as heavy as it needs to be, and as long as you're having fun, that's the important part.
Sharing, yeah.
Nice.
Okay, are you ready for the hot seat?
Oh yeah.
You know how the hot seat works?
I imagine my seat gets hot.
Your seat gets hot. Yeah. So it's a lightning round, and I guess as you pointed out when we were messing each other, it's the history on the table hot seat.
Seat.
Hot seat, right. Okay, so you ready?
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's kick it off. Favorite topic to play a game on?
History. Yeah, I mean, my love of these games kind of speaks for itself there. So I'm going to go with history for sure.
Okay. Best gaming experience you've had?
Best gaming experience was one of these dads on a map con. So, at the risk of talking about this other podcast on your podcast.
Oh no, please. That's why you're here.
Yeah. The getting together with some people that by and large, I kind of only knew over the internet with, like one exception. We went to this house con kind of as COVID appeared to be ending. Haha. Joke's on us. But we got together and played games, and no one got sick, and we all had a great time. And I haven't been to many cons overall, but it's hard to imagine anything better than that.
Nice. On theme, favorite shipwreck movie, TV show, or book?
Gilligan's Island.
Nice, and the only and right choice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I didn't have to think about that one.
Cuba Libre or Fire in the Lake?
Fire in the Lake.
Do you read?
Oh yeah.
Favorite historical era to read about?
I maybe kind of like near past, kind of like early 20th century in a way.
Okay. Who wins the Stanley Cup this year?
People with sticks that hit hockey pucks.
Great. Correct answer. Is Root a coin game?
Yeah, why not?
Okay. I pulled this one today. When can we expect the Maria episode of Coin Collectors?
Let's shoot for September. I think that would fit in our schedule well, and I still need to read the rules. So, at my speed, I think September would be likely.
Tiki bar or brewery?
Brewery.
Ugh, how dare you?
I brew my own beer, so I
have yeah?
Yeah. I'm a home brewer as well.
Okay. Well, I'm going to throw one at you then off the cuff here. What's your favorite type of beer?
I like session beers, just the low alcohol, easy drinking. Because if I'm going to have one, I'm going to have 4. He says as he knocks a few off that total. So I might as well make them low alcohol.
Awesome. What games are on your table right now?
Let's see. My most recent play was Echidna Shuffle with the 3-year-old.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a fun it's a high toy factor game, but it's got some fun aspects to it. And tomorrow I have I have a neighbor who comes over for a weekly game session, and depending if we can get a third, I might go one way, but if it's just him and I'm thinking about trying him out on Watergate.
Wow. Okay. Nice. Favorite coin faction?
It's hard to say. My favorite, I'll say my favorite relationship, I mentioned this earlier, is the ducks and Kibitates from Pendragon. I love the interaction. I'll be on either side of that group, but I just love how much they love and hate each other.
What's a game you've wanted to play but haven't yet?
Here I Stand.
Oh yeah, I meant to bring this up when you were talking about it, but Here I Stand. I think with the coin collectors, I'll propose that if the time ever permits. Like, that's my new favorite thing I do is block off a day around the winter holidays, and that's my Here I Stand day. And
well, maybe we could do like a Simpsons or sorry, the Jetsons meet the Flintstones kind of crossover.
Yeah,
and
crossover event.
You and Rich could join coin collectors, and we could do a Here I Stand or something.
That would that's just a great day all around. I guarantee it.
Yeah, but particularly if we all can wear funny hats. I think if they don't come in the box, we're all responsible for our own.
Got to hit the Halloween Depot this year, I guess.
Yeah, they got a lot of Pope hats there, do they?
Yeah, I'm sure they at least have the collar or something like that.
Yeah. Sexy Pope or something.
I mean, exactly. If any of them, it's going to be, yeah. Favorite non-war game related podcast?
I guess, Revolutions is history and war, but it's not game, I suppose. So yeah, Revolutions podcast by Mike Duncan.
What book is next to your bed right now?
Well, my Kindle is next to my bed, so a lot of books are next to my bed. I'm a hard convert for the e-reader.
Oh yeah, totally.
I've been reading some Preston and Child mystery novels. They're not high art, but they're kind of fun. And I just yesterday grabbed an audiobook about a KGB agent. I'm forgetting the title, but I'm about one chapter in, and it's already kind of grabbed me. So I'm really looking forward to finishing that one.
Nice. Last bad book you read?
Oh, what was the last bad book I read? I don't know. I just like to read so much. I rarely say a book is bad. I feel like maybe I just purged it from my memory. I feel like there's something I was like picked up and didn't finish. There was a book by the author of Tiger Man, Nick.
Oh yeah,
Nick Harway is the author's name.
I think so.
He had another one called like Nomicon, and I wanted to like it, but I didn't finish it. It was a book that just didn't sing for me. One thing I've discovered I don't like in books is when I don't feel like I can trust the narrator.
Oh, okay.
Somebody was talking about the things we carried today. And I remember just having a very visceral reaction to that book when I read it. Many years ago. I just could not get over this, at least as I recall. And this has been, decades since I read this book, but like the narrator being like, would kind of tell a story, but then would say that story was a lie, but then would have another say that the lie was a lie. And I could not deal with it. I just need, you can be an awful person or whatever. I don't really mind that in the narrator, but I need a reliable narrator. And it wasn't even so much lies in this Nomicon book. It was just kind of lots of different things going on. I could never quite tell if it was reality or not. And I just had to put it down. I had to know my limits.
Wow. Okay. If you could have one book on the island, what would it be?
I'll take an Asimov Foundation collection.
Okay.
Awesome. It's kind of one of the few series that I've reread. Usually I don't come back to books, but that one,
sure,
I hit that one every 10 years or so.
Nice. If you could have one movie.
One movie. I don't know. Maybe I'd pick. It's a hard one. I'm not. I enjoy movies. I don't watch any shortage of them. But there's nothing that really. I'm not a film buff. I'm not a cinema person. I'm just a guy who watches movies sometimes. So
fair.
Hey, let's go with some film companionship for Fire in the Lake, and we'll do Apocalypse Now.
All right. Pendragon or Liberty or Death?
Oh, don't make me pick my children. I love them both so much. I think I'll go with Pendragon. I feel like I have to in some ways champion that one just out of, it's this poor kind of people are somewhat skeptical about that one. So I have to be its champion.
Best city to get barbecue in?
As a vegetarian, I don't feel competent to answer this question. So I'm going to say Nome, Alaska.
I'm going to tell you what I told Volko,
Yeah.
and that is that vegetarian barbecue exists, and if done well, can be awesome.
I'd like to believe that my own efforts have not proved
Okay.
that point. And you could say, could be user error on my part, but yeah, I have not made it sing yet. But I wish to find out more. Yeah, you were talking about that restaurant in Kansas City that has some good vegetarian barbecue options, and I went there and I made my order and I picked it to go, and I took it with me, and it turned out they gave me some sort of meat thing, so I never got to try it. But I
No,
did go
really?
there to get something. Yeah, this is before you talked about this was this summer, but I happened to
In
be there.
Q39?
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
they just misheard my order or something like that, and I got the wrong thing,
Oh,
and
that's
so
too bad.
it's the one that got away.
The one mushroom that got away. That's too bad. Oh, okay. Gandhi or Distant Plain?
Hmm. I'm gonna go with Gandhi. That one's been real
Wow.
interesting lately. I'm only like a play and a half into it,
Sure.
but this is not done lightly. I mean, because I liked Distant Plain a lot more than I really thought I would. It
Mm.
really spoke to me. But Gandhi, I just like the idea that you have nonviolent factions. I mean, that alone makes me sit up and say interesting. Insert that GIF of you had my attention. Yeah, this is something. It's just something a little different, and it has those interplays of both mechanics and kind of above the table action in a way that I find very interesting. That and again, I like to think about what is this model here, and there's something very strong. There's a very strong thesis about kind of what the Brits could have done by tying their own hands. How if they become kind of more militarily active, it means there's more motivation for the population to get involved with these nonviolent resistance factions. I love that dynamic, that interplay there. So it's certainly, this is one of those games I'm thinking about when I'm brushing my teeth right now.
I'm going to break my own hot seat rule here and just butt in because on paper, and I think I've admitted this in the past, like Gandhi does nothing for me as like a design. Like I hear nonviolent factions and not that like I played plenty of like soulless Euros with no conflict. It's not that. It's just
Mhm.
like, but not only you guys, not only the coin collectors, but when I hear a group or an individual like that's really bought into Gandhi and has played Gandhi, those people are really high on Gandhi. You don't hear a ton of praise for it, but
Mhm.
when people are into it, it seems to really hit quite a few buttons. It sounds like a very interesting design. I want
Yeah.
to try it more than I did when it first came out.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it might be something of a self-selecting group are the ones who are engaging with Gandhi. Maybe people who, are looking for that little bit more kind of direct military conflict. Are not opting in and therefore are not there to say anything against it. But I do think it does
Fair.
something. It does something different. And if you've played some other coins and you want to try something that goes in a different direction, it's not entirely foreign. It's got in some ways it goes back to some of the the real core fundamentals. It's much closer to say Fire in the Lake than it is to Liberty or Death in kind of like a lot of its implementation details.
Okay.
But it at the same time has this very interesting twist. I mean, and the thing about like what does it mean to be nonviolent in a game where we're not actually like really hurting each other? In some sense, it's kind of silly to say, oh, this is the non-violent faction. Well, their wood pieces don't kill other wood pieces. Like, no one's violent. We're pushing pieces around on these pieces of wood around. So I think just labeling it non-violent, and then people have this kind of reaction. I just find that kind of interesting psychological change in the game to say this faction is non-violent, and then you say, oh, okay, what does that mean? Well, they work this track, and they put out these pieces, but they're non-violent. But I think it's also interesting from the larger perspective of the thesis of saying this can work. The designer's notes about the success of nonviolent action, as a tool to affect change against stronger government forms is kind of an interesting it's a persuasive argument, and it's interesting to see it play out or have the possibility of playing out in the game.
Sure. 18xx or cube rails?
Cube Rails. I love 18xx. If you can spend a day, if you want to spend a day doing an economic game, by all means, 18xx. But I love about cube rails. It often gives me that experience in an hour. Again, talking about my kids, I do a lot of gaming with my kids, and like they adore Chicago Express. And they beat me at it. I don't know if what that says about me or about my kids, but they can win a game of Chicago Express, particularly if they collude against their dad, which is a great strategy on their part. I have a big old shelf of Cube Trail. None of the original like Winsome Clan shells, but sure. I got a lot of the reprints, and those are great family fare. So that one's an easy pick for me.
Nice. Trick takers or card shedders?
So I was mentioning earlier, like you get one really powerful design, and then you don't really feel like you need to do other things. I wonder if Bridge is kind of sucked up all the trick taking air in the room. So I'm going to go with shedders. Nice. That those doesn't like just get around your hands and doing your mic drop and walking away from the table. That's always a great feeling.
I'm out.
Yep.
Falling Sky or Andy and Abyss? Andy and Abyss.
Oh, Andy and Abyss. Of all the games, Falling Sky, I didn't hit on that one, and I actually really liked Andy and Abyss. I liked it a lot better than I thought I would.
All right, you can relax.
I'm sweating, just drenched here.
Are you?
A little bit, actually. Yeah.
Nice. Anything else you want to add or say or plug, or where can people find you? Anything like that?
Sure. So again, I'm Mark. I'm one of the coin collectors, along with Tyler, Tom, and Phil. We put out roughly a monthly podcast under the Dads on a Map line. So come find us at dadsonamap.com or find our Discord and come interact with us. And we'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. And Mark's part of the History on the Table.
Yep. You can also
Discord
find me there. Absolutely. Yep.
So are some of the other guys.
Yeah. Great group of people. There's a lot of cross-pollination there. I think that speaks to the high quality of both communities.
That's right. I'm editing our April episode, and I was trying to talk about Deserted Island Dads, and Vietnam 1965-75 came up, and I was like, hey, and if you want to hear more about this game, plugging my own shit and stuff, and I was like, you can just go listen to Dads on a Map. And it took me like a few seconds, but wait a second, that's not right at all.
I'll have to have like dads under the table after we've had a late night, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, great. Mark, thank you so much for giving up your Monday night and coming by and just talking games. And I just love hearing, my example of this is Mike Denson, who designed Last 100 Yards. You get him started talking about something he's passionate about. And it's just, I love hearing people talk about, whether they're a designer or just a fan, stuff they enjoy and like. And when you really go in depth on the different layers of coin and different historical simulations you like, it's really enjoyable. So thank you for taking the time to do this.
Well, thanks for inviting me. I had a blast. I'm always kind of amazed at, it's one of those great like democratization of information that the internet does, is podcasts and these kinds of like, stuff on YouTube, that just people are just passionate about stuff, go out and do things. And, sometimes you find someone who's, passionate about like model cars, and, 3 hours later, you've been watching someone restore old Matchbox cars or something. I've literally like watched people split wood with an axe on YouTube for like an hour on end, just because they're just so good at it. And just, you just get sucked into their passion. That's just too much fun.
When COVID first, I had COVID the June of first COVID year zero.
COVID 1.0.
Right. And, I was like, I'm going to work from home. And like 8 hours later, I'd watched so many Defunct Land videos, which is about like old amusement parks or abandoned amusement parks and rides. And it's like, what am I doing with my life?
I guess I know what I'm doing tonight. Sorry, honey, you can't come to bed now.
Hey, you want to watch something really exciting tonight? Here's the Zambini Zinger from Kansas City.
It's even more exciting than that canoeing video I made you watch yesterday.
Oh God, are we watching wood splitting videos again? Awesome. All right. Hey, have a great week. And you know what? That Here I Stand game, we should talk. I'd be down for that.
Let's do that. So hey, I want to say congratulations on the baby and good luck with all that.
Thank you. We're exactly a month out.
All right.
She'll be here June 2nd. So
exciting.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you, Matt.
This interview was pre-recorded on May 2nd, 2022.